Hello, my name's Redell Olsen and I teach on Introduction to Poetry, which is a first year course with my colleague Dr. Montgomery. This is the anthology we use, the Norton Anthology of Poetry, and you'll need to buy a copy of this, its latest edition, before coming on the course. We look at this poem. You can see that my copy is very well thumbed, full of post-it notes, and perhaps that gives you a way into thinking how you might approach the preparation for this course, which is to begin to dip in and out and begin to perhaps scribble some notes on post-it notes, begin to make a roadmap of poems that interest you. Perhaps there are contemporary issues and themes which you want to track back through a range of poets and poems. And they might be, for example, they might be issues of race, issues of gender, issues of climate change, for example. And you might begin to look back at some of these poems in here and think, how have these issues always been there, but been perhaps framed differently, perhaps in different ways, different forms across the eras. The other thing that we look at on the course is the very important and compelling question of what is poetic language. We look at that from a sense of how close it is to conventional speech making, conventional novel writing, but then also how the space of the poem allows for very different approaches to syntax, to form, to grammar, and what implications that has, what that does in terms of perhaps opening up new possibilities for thinking, articulating, perhaps that are quite different from the context, the eras in which they were written. So perhaps we like to argue that perhaps poetry is very forward-thinking in its possibilities for meaning-making and thinking. So poetry as thinking is really what we're very much concerned with. On the course, we have a very useful little primer. We use Geoffrey Wainwright's poetry, The Basics, which looks at tones of voice, it looks at diction, it looks at rhythm, it looks at syntax. It's very much a very good, useful way into thinking about how to approach a poem on a page. And we strongly recommend that you have a look at that before coming on the course, but it's certainly one we'll be referring to as the course develops. The other thing that makes our course very distinctive is the fact that we encourage you to learn a poem by heart and recite it. So another way to prepare for coming on the course is to read lots of poems aloud to yourself or your friends, your pets, and think about what difference the sonic possibilities of poetry make when they're heard aloud. So a poem that one of the ones that's been read, learnt in the last few years by students on the course has been by Emily Dickinson and seems very relevant now. It's her poem 314, Hope. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. So we're hoping that you will. We're asking Crumb that you buy this anthology, that you get to grips with some poems in it before coming on the course, but we're very much looking forward to welcoming you to Royal Holloway and to writing about poetry, to talking about poetry, and to thinking about poetic meaning with you.